to the Monday, August 31st meeting, regular meeting of the Littleton Planning Commission. Could we please have the roll?
Chair Rudnicki.
Here.
Vice Chair Schwartzbacher. Here. Commissioner Allman. Here. Commissioner Bolt. Commissioner Coronado.
Here.
Thank you, David. Commissioner Miller.
Here.
Commissioner Merzei.
Here.
Commissioner Reynolds.
Here.
Commissioner Stallman.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay, next item up is the approval of the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda? Seeing none, we will move on to certification of minutes. Seems like it happened a long time ago. Certification of the April 27th, 2020 regular... Yes.
If I could interrupt, we do need to go over how the meeting's going to run tonight before we move too much further.
Okay. All right, step in. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
It's all right.
Good evening, Commissioners, staff, citizens, and guests. I'm Colleen Norton, City Clerk. I'll be the moderator for this evening's virtual meeting of the Planning Commission. We're streaming the meeting on Cable Channel 8, Facebook, and on our website, littletongov.org. Those wishing to participate in any public comment portion of the meeting are advised to view the meeting at littletongov.org, My Littleton, Littleton 8 TV. This broadcast has the least amount of delay. As always, citizen participation is encouraged during public comment and public hearings. To participate via phone, please call 669-900-6833, and when prompted, enter the webinar ID 940-2310-2017. There will be two opportunities for public participation this evening, once during public comment and again during public hearing. If you wish to speak during either of these opportunities, please call in early and stay on the line. When public comment or the public hearing is announced, press star 9 to raise your hand to be recognized as a speaker. Microphones will be muted for all citizens calling in. Once recognized, speakers will be unmuted and will have 3 minutes to address the Planning Commission. The City Clerk will announce when you have 30 seconds remaining, and again when your time is up. We expect comments to be civil. Disrespectful or disruptive behavior will not be tolerated. For agenda items, the Chair will ask for a motion in a second, followed by discussion and a vote. Votes on agenda items will be made using a thumbs up for a yes vote and thumbs down for a no vote. The Clerk will call each vote with all ayes and nays. Again, if you plan on participating during public comment or the public hearing, please call 669-900-6833, and when prompted, enter webinar ID 940-2310-2017. Press star 9 to raise your hand to speak. Thank you, Chair.
Hey, I've got the phone a little distant. Can everybody hear me?
Can hear you great.
Okay, great. Whew. Next up, certification of minutes from our April 27th, 2020 regular meeting. Are there any changes, corrections, etc.? Or do we have a motion to approve?
I move to approve based on the clerk's certification the April 27th, 2020 minutes of the Littleton Planning Commission.
Do you have a second? Okay. And all those in favor?
Excuse me, who was the second?
That was me.
Thank you. And we will be doing a thumbs up and thumbs down.
Right. Thumbs up for approval?
Yes.
Make sure we can see it on the screen.
Uh-huh.
We're good?
The vote is 7 in favor. The motion carries unanimously.
Okay. Next up is public comment. Let's see, for items not on tonight's agenda. Colleen, take us away as far as any rules, regulations.
Thank you, Chair. If you wish to address the Planning Commission under public comment and are not already in the queue to speak, please call 669-900-6833, and when prompted, enter the webinar ID 940-2310-2017. Then press star 9 to raise your hand to be recognized. Citizen microphones will be automatically muted until the citizen is called upon to speak. Citizens will be recognized by the last 3 digits of their phone number. When called on to speak, please state your name and your district or address for the record. Public comment is an opportunity to express opinions or ask questions regarding issues that are not part of public hearings on tonight's agenda. Each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes. The city clerk will notify you when you have 30 seconds remaining, and again when your time is up. We currently have 3 callers in the queue, one with their hand raised to speak. Caller with the last 3 phone number digits of 448. You have been unmuted. Please press *6 to begin speaking. Remember to identify yourself and give us either your council district or your address.
Hello, this is Eric Veith. I live on Gallup Street in District 3. I'm here to provide comments on the Unified Land Use Code planning process. Today I speak to you as a lifelong resident of Littleton. I'm also a volunteer member of the Littleton Housing Task Force, which I joined with the goal of providing future generations with the same opportunities to live in and enjoy Littleton that have been afforded to me. And I appreciate. Yep.
This is the item that's on public hearing tonight. This is not the appropriate time to speak about that. This is for public comment for things that are not on the agenda tonight. Public hearing will happen later.
Yep.
So please stay on the line and we'll call on you again.
Okay.
Okay, we do have another caller with their hand raised. Caller with the last 3 phone number digits of 819. You have been unmuted. Please press *6 and begin speaking. Please remember to identify yourself.
Hello, my name is Pam Chapman. I live in downtown District 1. Let's see, clerk and attorney, I would like a point of clarification. The public hearing tonight is on Title 10 of the City Code. It is not on the Unified Land Use Code project, which is separate and is said to be going to happen in next year. I need a clarification because I'm going to complain about it too. So,
Reed, do you want to address that?
Yeah, I would say tonight, while this is all part of the ULUC, specifically we're talking about the Phase 2 amendments to the Chapter 10 right now. So in terms of the entire process, I guess I would say everything's sort of open, but as it comes to the specific changes that are proposed, and these specific changes, I would ask that you hold those comments, as those are all part, in the end run, ULUC changes that will be incorporated. But specifically, these are just the Phase 2 amendments.
So,
okay.
then are they okay to talk about ULUC as long as they're not talking about Phase 2?
I would say that's fine.
Okay, then I need to apologize to the first caller, and we'll get you back on. Pam, go ahead. Let me restart your timer.
Oh, actually, if you want to take Eric first, that's fine.
Well, you're already on the line, so let's take you.
Okay. Thanks very much. So I'm Pam Chapman. I live in District 1. My comments are about the actually envision process and the lack of a product that is essential, and which I think is going to cause us problems, causing us problems now. And the product that is lacking in the envision process is the true comprehensive plan, the true integrated vision of the future Littleton as a city, as a system from the 30,000-foot view. And this is the key, integration. This is a complex system, and it has many elements. There's a city budget, which we want an economic future that's strong. So we want to know our balance of retail taxes and property taxes and how that evolves over time.
Did we just lose Pam?
So, Colleen, We seem to be having some technical issues on the Channel 8 end, so we actually have been asked to go to a recess so they can restart.
Okay.
Is that correct, Tyler? Or Caitlin?
Yeah, Caitlin. But Pam seems
Yeah,
to
if we could
have
toss the
dropped off.
recess for about 5 minutes, we're just going to restart our equipment here.
Okay, thank you.
We're back after our technical difficulties, the new norm of today. We're going to go back to public comment on items not on tonight's agenda. Colleen, want to take a call?
Sure.
And is Pam called?
We did lose Ms. Chadbourne, so Pam, if you would call back in, we would appreciate it so that you can have your full 3 minutes. I do have 2 other calls on the line, one with their hand raised. The last 3 phone number digits of 693. 693, you have been unmuted. please press *6 and begin speaking now. Please remember to identify yourself. The last 3 phone number digits of 693. Let's give it just a couple more seconds to allow for the delay. Caller with the last 3 phone number digits of 693. You have been unmuted. Please press *6 and begin speaking now. Chair, that is the only caller with their hand raised. I do not have any other callers in the queue with their hand raised to speak.
So we should move on.
That's your call, Chair.
Okay, well, we'll move on then. General business, there's none. So we'll go right into our main event. It's a public hearing on PC Resolution 05-2020, recommending approval of Phase 2 amendments to Title 10 of the City Code relative to downtown development. Let me take you through the process here for the public hearing. First off, we're going to have a staff and consultant presentation, followed by questions for the staff and consultant of a technical nature from Planning Commission members. Then we'll open the meeting to public comment. Colleen will give procedure, 3 minutes, etc., for speakers. When everyone has had a chance to speak, we'll close the public comment portion. Then we'll go to a motion discussion. After that, we'll go to amendments. Keep in mind, commissioners, that amendments are done one at a time. If you bring up an amendment, we'll discuss it and vote on that before we go to the next amendment. So we'll not stack up amendments. When all the amendments are completed, then we'll go back to vote on the main motion. For tonight, we're going to do it a little different. Rather than going down one person at a time, I call out your name. We're going to go to putting your hands up like we did at the Council Planning Commission study session. So you go on my screen, you go to participants, and you go to the lower right-hand corner and you press the raised hand. And I should be able to, hopefully, with my technical difficulties here, hopefully I'll be able to see who is wanting to speak on Planning Commission. At the end, when we go to final summations, I will go down the line one by one. You don't need to raise your hand, and we'll get your final comments before and finding of fact before we go to the vote on the main motion. So with that, staff, take it away.
Good evening, members of Planning Commission. I'm Kathleen Osher, Director of Community Services. It's my pleasure to be joined this evening by Brett Keast and Brian Mabry from our Candid Keast team. And as you'll remember, back in April, which seems like a long time ago, back in April, we amended the scope of Candid Keast Collaborative to work in a second phase of amendments to our existing city code relative to downtown development. And this was to answer our continued moratorium, which expires on October 11th, and have these amendments to our existing Title 10 considered 1 year prior to us completing the full Unified Land Use Code. So this evening before you is the amended Title 10 for your consideration of a recommendation to City Council for this amended Title 10 relative to downtown development. We're going to have Brett Keast do a very similar presentation from last week's study session, just to refresh everyone with the amendments that are in place. And then we'll take any questions that you may have for clarification, and we'll move on to the public hearing process. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Brett Keast.
Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, very good. Well, pleased to be back with you this evening. As Kathleen indicated, I will go through generally the same presentation for the benefit of those who may be in the public. Would you like me to share my screen, Kathleen?
Actually, I think Brian's already got his screen shared, so you should be able to see that presentation.
I can, okay.
Yep.
Very good. So I'll just go through this same presentation. I will try to elaborate a little bit based on our discussion last week. Since then, we have been working on addressing some of the comments from the last joint session that we had. So might be able to elaborate a little bit further if we get into the details on some of your questions of clarification or amendments. So next slide, please, Brian. So this is just to reiterate the process that the city had gone through preceding this process of developing the Envision Littleton plan. And the plan does its job in terms of being a 30,000 foot overall vision document. It gives specific guidance and policies and some general directions, but it does not go to the extent of law. So the city has followed through with the regulations at this point, phase 2 of Title 10, focused on downtown. This is where we get into the specific details, the ingredients to the cookbook, if you will, where we implement the general policies and the general ideas and vision of the comprehensive plan and put it into specific regulatory language. Obviously, the phase 2 amendments and will follow with the ULUC is a much more involved process than is the comprehensive plan process. Next slide, Brian. So just the phase 2 draft of the downtown building block. This is to address how the draft ordinance addresses the identified priorities that were initially established by the city council. We'll outline updated and added provisions. So as we've gone through this process, we've been receiving comments and we've been making changes and edits and documenting those all the way through this process. We have worked with the public to help identify their preferences through public meetings, the Envision Studios, surveys, and a number of other input means. And we're summarizing the approach to the best, most technical and best practices toward drafting the regulations, and then identifying key considerations. That's really the phase that we're in right now, or what are the key things we really want to tackle with these phase 2 amendments. So you see the process that we've come to. We have this evening's public hearing. On September 15th, we'll have the first city council reading. October 2nd is the second reading, and October 11th is when the moratorium ends. And in between, I believe we have a work session with the city council on September 23rd between first and second readings. So these phase 2 amendments are basically following course, picking up on the work that was done by staff beforehand with the phase 1 amendments and building on those and working toward a draft or a proposed regulations that can be looked at by the planning commission, give us comments through public hearing, and then a recommendation toward the city council, who will take this up for consideration as we proceed into early October. Again, the whole thing is to implement the comprehensive plan. So that's the foundation or the baseline of this work. There's a lot of conversation in the comprehensive plan about a character-based approach. Hopefully people are getting a greater grasp of the difference between character and the character areas in downtown versus what the city's been doing to date with just use-based districts. And then the whole overall idea is to have new regulations in place to relieve the moratorium that terminates on October 11th. So you see the defined priorities there. Those were the original kind of big topics that the City Council identified as we set out on this process. Next slide, please. And then there were several other issues that emerged. You see those listed on the screen there, and we've talked about each of those to various levels of detail in our joint meeting last week. I would suspect we'll be talking more about them tonight. The purpose of this is basically to rename and repurpose what is now the Central Area District. Right now, that district is overly broad and vague. I was just looking at it before I got online in terms of some of the standards that just don't go to the level of detail that are necessary to deliver definitive and deliberate outcomes. Thus, maybe some of the question about some of the developments that have happened and how they relate to the existing character and historic fabric of downtown. They focus on land use and not as much on character. So there's, other than the design guidelines, which were a separate document, there wasn't specific standards to really focus on the design and the form of development, which the Phase 2 amendments tackle. It was much too open-ended and discretionary. A lot of the standards weren't spelled out explicitly, so applicants weren't real clear on exactly what was going to be required to receive approval, and they weren't predictable and they weren't certain. So that's what we're after with these Phase 2 amendments, is to make this process much more articulate so that we can provide for very deliberate outcomes that we all want to see and expect in the community. So there has been quite a lot of public engagement. Of course, the pandemic hit us right as we were kicking off this process. But I feel like, comparatively to other communities that we've worked in, Littleton has done a very good job. I want to commend staff for all the outreach and social media and emails and other types of things that have been done to try to reach out to the community. Seems there's always folks who miss those opportunities, but this is an open process. We certainly invite them to participate with us. So you can see each of the different things that have been done dating back since February. We did a lot of polling and other ways to get input from citizens rather than just talking to or showing concepts and ideas. We wanted to kind of weigh how those relate to what the true preferences of the community are. And we've been working through Historic Preservation Board, which gave a unanimous recommendation of approval to the council last Monday, I believe it was. And so we're at the Planning Commission public hearing this evening. So you can see an example of some of the physical drawings that were done to help portray some of the ideas and concepts in the Phase 2 amendments and to get votes back from citizens who participated. Some of those we had over 100 that signed up and just under 100 that participated. So one of the topics that we talked about was green space and tree protection, just generally greenscaping throughout downtown altogether. There's different types of open space types that you see there on the table on the right with their respective standards. And then the downtown area is divided into 4 character areas. So there's the downtown district that is renamed the CA district. And then within that, there are 4 character areas. And within those, there are different building types that are permitted and different buffer types between different character areas or even building types. And then also a minimum tree canopy coverage. So I was going back through looking at the landscaping standards that are currently in the document. And the question was posed to us last week about, will we see more green after these are adopted than we do right now? And the answer is absolutely yes. The current landscaping standards call for screening and call for buffering, but they provide no standards. So they don't specify exactly what's required. So it's left entire discretionary. There's just a lot more landscaping that is now included with the Phase 2 amendments. Brian? Okay. Building heights, there has been a lot of discussion on this. Again, for each of the different 4 character areas, you see those listed in the columns. There's the downtown neighborhood residential, the downtown transition area, Main Street, and then the mixed use, or the DMU. And so for each of those, there are different building types that are permitted. And for each of the different building types, there are different heights that are allowed. Great care was taken to try to relate the building scale to the general building scale and to be sensitive to adjacent buildings and to adjacent character areas, or those that are budding, by having standards along sensitive edges. So whether that's where a building abuts another building, or a character area abuts another character area or district, that there is a limitation of height and other types of requirements to help ease that transition so that you don't have any abrupt changes. Also, there are a lot of graphics and standards that relate to where a building is placed on the lot. In the current ordinance, whenever there are minimum standards, essentially a property would have to meet the minimum, but there's nothing to say that they can't be much larger than that. And so therefore, you might have some lots that meet the minimum and others that set back way beyond that. Some of them put parking in front of the building or to the side of the building or on the street or to the rear. And so therefore, you just get a real mixed match of different building placements and scales and heights and things of that nature. So it doesn't really portray the type of character that we want, or the mixed use, pedestrian oriented, highly walkable downtown. So you can see the graphics basically show you all the different front, side, rear, interior side setback requirements, the amount of the lot that can be covered, the percentage of the lot that's required to be public or private open space, so forth and so on. So again, these are for each of the different character areas and by building type. Building massing and step backs. Again, this is a critical component to character. Make sure that buildings and their scale and their height and their overall bulk fit within the environment. So there are specific standards here in terms of the number of stories, the actual height, and then the upper stories are typically set back minimum of 20 foot, as you see there in the graphic. So each of these tables for building types and the character areas will illustrate something similar with the applicable standards. Again, the sensitive edge is probably one of the key things we want to portray to those who may be listening, of being sensitive to where there are transitions from one building type to another, or character area or district to another. Buffering. Initially, there was a series of buffers of different widths and plant materials, and the Phase 2 amendments that are before you now have simplified that down to a single buffer yard. Currently, it stands at 5 feet, although we got some comments about the width of that relative to certain plant types in our meeting last week. But it specifies 5 foot, allows for fences or walls, and then specifies the number of trees that are required per 100-foot section or part thereof. And so this is for whenever there are, again, transitions. It's another means of transition between properties or districts or character areas. Parking, obviously we've heard a lot about parking in downtown. Downtowns are unique in terms of the type of parking and placement of parking and how you walk between parking and downtown businesses as opposed to strip centers and others. So parking's always looked at differently. There was work here looking at how to calibrate the standards relative to a downtown area as opposed to other areas throughout Littleton. The standards as they are ended up at 1 space per bedroom for multifamily and 2 spaces for 2 or more bedrooms. Restaurants reflect the the Institute of Traffic Engineers standards. There are credits and reductions that are available. We are looking at the 50% maximum because we have already reduced ratios, so we want to make sure that we have ample parking. So we are kind of recalibrating that. And then also providing for rideshare. We all know how Lyft and Uber have changed things. And so factoring that into the parking requirements to provide for drop-off pickup spaces for rideshare factors into the overall regulations as well. There are provisions for on-street parking, so they can get credit for on-street parking for those spaces that directly abut the lot. There's also provisions in here for allowable reductions for a shuttle to the RTD station. And there is also a reduction for those businesses that are within 1,320 feet or a quarter mile from the RTD station. The idea being that people could use transit and then walk to their ultimate destination, whether that's business or residential. And then there's also provision for tuck under parking. You've got some great examples in town where you park under the backs of buildings, and it's a good way to provide for parking and to shield it or screen it from the public spaces or public areas. And there were provisions as to pocket islands and providing for landscape timbers as barriers, and then there were provisions added regarding we changed the term from xeriscaping to what I don't remember what the term was, low water usage or low maintain landscaping. We made the change, and I just don't recall the phrase right now. So those are some other changes regarding landscaping relative to parking. The land use table, there's a lot of uses that were carried through from your current use table, so you should recognize many of those. There were some new ones, vehicle service minor, kind of a question of where that should be permitted as a conditional use or as a permitted use. The same goes for a group home for elderly. Right now it's permitted with, should it be permitted with limitations rather than being a conditional use? There's certain uses that we know how they operate, we know how they function, and we can write standards for them rather than forcing them all to go through a conditional use process. Recovery residence, right now it's permitted in the 3 character areas that you see shown there. And then parking structure is permitted with limitations. And there was a question last week about limiting the maximum height of a parking structure that we will be addressing. There were some definitions that were removed. Slot homes are now prohibited within downtown, so those were removed as the definition because that no longer shows up in this document. And family was also removed. There's also clarification of a lot of additional terms just to make sure that they are clearly defined and understood by those who are reading or interpreting these phase 2 changes. And then a series of additions and corrections to standards and use related definitions as they have been added and changed and adjusted as we've gone through this process. Again, as to the zoning district and character areas, the CA district has been renamed to DT downtown. There are 4 character areas, including the downtown mixed use. That part of the downtown area provides for more intensity than the other areas. The other areas include the downtown transition area. We'll show you a map here momentarily that helps to transition scale and intensity to Main Street and also to the downtown neighborhood residential area. The downtown historic district that encompasses Main and Alamo Streets. There's some additional work that is occurring on that will ultimately be factored in and dovetailed into the ULUC. And certainly recognizing that historic preservation of the wonderful structures and assets the community have is a priority. Just want to note that this is not the end-all be-all. There are many more regulations to draft in the ULUC. Some of those will complement what's already in these Phase 2 amendments. So this is the character area map. It is the same as what we showed last week, with the exception being highlighting the area in the hatched more clearly. This is the portion of the mixed-use area that is limited to 3-story heights. So that was not very clear in the map last week, so we have made that much more clear. It's the area that's shown there, kind of right in the middle, near Geneva Park city offices. And that has also changed over time as there's been conversations through this process. And then the DMU was extended north a half block between Rapp and Nevada. The transition area was extended east and west along Alamo, and then Main Street was also extended east and west along Main Street. And so that is where the character area map resides right now. And I know that there was some questions and comments last week in the joint work session. Next slide, please, Brian. And that concludes the overview presentation. Last week, we took notes of the comments that we heard from both council members and commissioners. That was delivered, I believe, to each of you and was organized into different changes that may be made now and also in the future with the ULUC. So those identified administrative edits, basically those, we're going to use track changes to identify those things that were check marked from the joint meeting last week. We're in the process of going through and making text changes and doing them in a different track change color to take before the council I guess at their upcoming meeting. And then any comments or amendments, recommended amendments that come out of this meeting tonight will be documented in yet a different color. So that way council will be able to follow the outcomes and recommendations that have come at each stage along the way, including the 3 conditions that the Historic Preservation Board identified or recommended. So none of those are set in stone yet. They are all integrated for the consideration and ultimate decision by City Council. So it may be most efficient to utilize those meeting notes perhaps to help focus the conversation. And Chair, that's really up to you. But that kind of synthesized everything that was talked about last week. So it might help kind of organize and make sure that nothing slips through the cracks. That's up to you.
Any other comments from staff?
No further comments, unless you have any clarifying questions you need.
Yes. Planning commissioners, if you would use your go to the participants little button down in the lower center area, press the button for raise hand, and then I'll acknowledge you. Let's see if that works. Nobody is.
Brian, could we take the presentation down, please?
Yes. Much better. Robin, got your hand raised?
Yes, I have a couple of questions. The first one is it's on page 62, and it's under the new and unlisted uses. It's A, approach to uses. So it says a use that is not listed may be authorized by the city manager or their designee as appropriate within a defined use category or as functionally the same as permitted, limited, or conditional use. So my question about this, so does this statement fall in with the present threshold between staff making a use interpretation and when a change in use request comes before the planning commission?
Well, I'll take part of that, and then I'll let Jennifer, or maybe Jennifer should go first. She's probably more articulate in terms of your current processes.
Right, and Reed might have to step in here as well. But if I'm understanding you correctly, Robin, basically, if we had somebody come to us, an applicant, and ask for a particular use to do, and it would be left to city manager as designee of what would that use fall into an existing category that we have, and when we feel comfortable that yes, it falls in that category. So the answer to that question is yes, that's what that part of the code means to me now. But you're asking if I then made the determination, no, it doesn't fit, could they appeal it to Planning Commission?
No, not exactly. I'm asking, is this how the use is decided, whether it's an interpretation by staff or how it goes before the planning commission? You know how sometimes we'll have a use that they want that's not in what they've already allowed, it'll come before planning commission. So I'm asking, is this the same as we're doing it now?
My interpretation would be yes. Reed,
Okay.
do you have a different interpretation?
Sorry, I do not, but I am going to take a look at that provision in the code, and I may have a different one. So I may come back to you on that one, Robin. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Now, Mark, I had two other questions. Do you want me to get back in the queue or continue?
No, continue with the three.
Okay.
Can I address that real quick, Robin?
Oh, of course.
So there is a use table, and the use table, obviously there's all sorts of uses that we can't possibly anticipate. So the approach and methodology that was used was to create use categories, and then within that you have individual uses. Now all of those uses are defined, okay? So that alone should help staff in making a determination. However, somebody comes in and they say they want to bring, some particular use that nobody's ever heard of before. We need to figure out where might that fit into the document. And so that's what this decision is to use the decision criteria to help decide which district is this functionally similar to. In other words, the scale and the impact and height and noise and light and all the other things, traffic that go into that consideration. So that decision criteria is supposed to be used to help make that decision. Oftentimes it's something that can be done by staff, but sometimes, it's not something that staff may be comfortable to make that call. And in that case, they would probably bring it to the planning commission.
Thanks, Brett. And that sounds like from what Jennifer says is how we do it now anyway. So it's no change, and that's great. So the other question, next question is about the DMU roof slopes. Knowing that the columns are going to be changed, like right now, I know there's some dysfunction in the columns. Some of the DMU and DTA columns didn't get transferred when the titles were transferred. But it's my understanding that the DMU roof slope requirements are only including the townhouses. And I was curious why it did not also include the single family detached or attached homes.
Ryan, you want to weigh in on that one?
Yes. So the question is, roof slopes for single-family detached?
It's about the DMU, so the DMU area, and roof slopes right now only for the DMU only include townhomes. And I was curious why it did not include the single family homes attached or detached.
So Robin, I'm looking at page 168 and I see that it does have roof slope.
But what you have to keep in mind here is that the DTA and the DMU columns didn't all get transferred when the titles did. So right now, if you look at the columns, the DTA shows the DMU roof slopes. So there is some confusion about that, but I know that they're going to be looking at that to correct that. I went through I went through everything, and right now, if you look at the way it is versus what we were told, the DMU shows the DTA roof slopes, and obviously vice versa.
Brian, you may be able to comment on that. I don't know if that is the rule in all cases.
Yeah, well, so there were some numbers in those two character areas that the intent was to exchange or switch because of the function of the DTA kind of protecting the downtown from the more higher intensity of the DMU. So there may have been some unintentional consequences of that, to where, and you kind of are, the commissioner kind of already mentioned it, where the switch wasn't completely done, or was there might have been erroneously done in some parts. So I think that's a part of it. Overall though, there are the intent is to have the roof slopes there for like single family detached, for example, where in the character areas where single family detached is allowed. I don't know the page number, but in table 10.418 parentheses I, there are some standards in there for roof slope that currently are showing for the DNR character area and the DMU. But there might be still some lingering problems with having done that, switching some of the standards to where that wasn't completely correctly carried out.
Yeah,
I created a chart for myself that right now shows the roof slopes, and the DTA has, it does not show roof slopes for anything but the townhouses, looks like the apartments and the garages, whereas where the DMU shows almost everything having roof slopes, which I know we don't want. So that was why we talked about the columns being screwed up. So
yeah, we are reconciling that, Robin.
Right. So if I'm hearing correctly, the roof slopes let me get back to my question over here. For the DMU, roof slopes will be included for the single family homes, detached, and the townhomes.
I would say yes, and also in DTA. So that's what that's what needs to still be reconciled. So it looks like it could possibly be in both.
Yeah, and it is hard because with the chart not being accurate right now, it was hard for me to tell which one, but as long as it's the townhouse for the DMU, because the DTA includes that for everything except I think the apartments and the garages, but the DMU should include only the single family homes, whether attached, detached, and townhouses. And that's what you're saying is accurate.
I believe that is correct, but that is definitely something that we will make sure is correctly reflected.
I appreciate it. I just have one more question. It's on the sensitive edge. So right now for sensitive edges, we show them in townhomes, apartments, live work, mixed use, commercial, and the office institutional, but there is not one for the multiplexes. And it seemed like you would at least want the multiplexes to be at least similar with the townhomes where they have, a little less restrictive as opposed to having nothing.
Robin, state the first part of your question.
And I'll tell you where it's on too. It's on page 180.
Okay.
Though there's 4 180s, so you'll have to find that there. There's several 180s. It's on the sensitive edge, and it's multiplexes. And when you look at the multiplex sensitive edge, there's nothing. It says NA. And that seems strange to me because we have sensitive edges for the townhouses, apartments, live work, mixed use, commercial, office, but nothing for the multiplex. So that was my question. It was that supposed to be there or purposely left out?
That is another one.
This is Brian. Oh, Brett, I could weigh in for a bit on that, I think.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. So the intent of a multiplex is, so let me just preface to say it could really go, like so many things go either way. It could have the sensitive edge protections in it like the townhouse does. The multiplex could have that. Or there's an argument probably that it wouldn't need it. The argument that it wouldn't need it would be that the multiplex is intended to be designed and is coded to be designed like a large house, like a large single-family detached house. And real single-family detached does not have that sensitive edge protection. So someone could argue that multiplex wouldn't need the sensitive edge requirement either. On the other hand, there are multiple units, 3 to 4 units in a multiplex. And so it does take on some of the characteristics of a townhouse too. And so that's kind of, pushes toward the thought that it should have the sensitive edge requirement. Just the bottom line is it was intentionally left as an NA for the character districts where multiplex is allowed, but I could see it going in there so that there would be the sensitive edge requirement if the commission so desires.
Well, I make the comment because the homes in townhomes are shorter, whereas the multiplex actually allows a 45-foot height versus the shorter 30-foot height for the others. So that's why, because of that greater height, it does make it larger than it would the other homes, because they're limited to the 30 feet. So that's why, to me, I thought maybe the sensitive edge should have been there.
Yeah. So we'll take a look at that and compare and contrast against the other building types and look at similar scale and address that if need be.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank
I'm
you.
done.
Bruce.
Okay, thank you. Couple of questions, and again, a ton of work went into this whole thing, and I think it's an improved document from the meeting that we had with council last week. So just well done to staff and Ken and Keats for all your guys' effort in terms of pulling this together. On page 45 of the Title 10 document, I think I know the answer to this question, but maybe does it need to be clarified? Early on in our conversations, there was some concepts thrown out that maybe instead of calling everything a maximum number, that maybe some of these could be stipulated as minimum numbers. For example, on page 45, you've got the RE residential district with quote unquote density of 1.6 dwelling units per acre, which I'm pretty comfortable is a maximum number. Some of these other districts we talk about, for example, maximum height. I assume the intent here was to stipulate what the max density was going to be. So I guess I'm wondering if we need to call it out as maximum density as opposed to just quote unquote density. Maybe it's self-evident, but I'm just throwing that out there as something that I noted when I was reading through the whole thing.
So that is a section of the zoning ordinance that has not been addressed as part of phase 2. All the residential districts. So those will be wholesale rethought and put into tables more comparable to what you've been looking at. So all that stuff will be a great deal more clearly defined.
Perfect. Okay.
Bruce, you're jumping the gun by about 8 months here.
Yeah, well,
We'll get there, I promise.
it's always good to be ahead of the curve. On page 160, Reed, you had indicated you were going to look at the research, the disability group home fire inspection requirements. Have you had a chance to do that, or is that still in process?
That's still in process. I want to see if the state followed through on licensing requirements for some of those types of, it's one thing to have a group home. The matter that we're referencing was not technically what's called a group home. It was, I forget the term, but it was a different subset of group homes. So let me take a look. I still haven't had an opportunity to do that, but I certainly will.
Sure, no worries. How should we handle that tonight then, as far as the document is concerned?
Well, right in terms of how we regulate group homes.
Well, I guess in terms of making a recommendation to council.
I don't think that this specific type of living situation, the one that we talked about in Arvada, would come under that one. I think that's a state licensing issue, and I need to take a look at that. Right now, group homes are licensed by the state.
Which I respect and I understand that, but I'm uncomfortable with not stipulating that we have oversight with respect to fire code. And I yes, while in fact they are licensed by the state, I think there's a public safety, health, and welfare requirement that we have an obligation to cover with respect to application of fire codes. And if we're not going to tweak that as part of the broader sense of what we're doing tonight, I just want to make sure we don't lose track of it, and or that it comes back before council at some point, because I think it's a very important piece of code modification that needs to be considered.
And I can appreciate that, but without knowing specifically what their current regulations are. I mean, I know that there's certain HUD guidance that goes into, there's certain inspections that are already required, certain reporting requirements. I don't want to get sideways with what it is that they're required to do. Now, certainly if we can supplement something for purposes of health, safety, welfare of our citizens, that's something that we certainly can do. But until I know specifically what they're being required to do, Commissioner Stallman, I'm a little uncomfortable making that decision tonight.
No, I understand. Okay. If we can, if you and I at a minimum can communicate back on that, just to sort of see what next steps, that'd be terrific. If not to the whole group.
Nope. I'll put it on my list.
Okay. On your meeting notes, there's the item of concerning sustainability, and it says sustainability will be defined per Historic Preservation Board. And certainly that's appropriate, but I noted at least a couple, 2-3 comments in some of the email submissions that were part of tonight's meeting documents that mention the idea of green building standards and how do we codify the application of green building standards. So is it staff's intent to make sustainability just something that has to do with historic preservation, or do we intend to go further down the road in terms of I think somebody made the comment that, we're going to be building buildings that'll be around, using the code as it's being proposed for the next 20 years, call it. And it'd be nice to stipulate some level of green, however you want to do it, LED or green standards in terms of the construction as part of what Littleton requires of buildings in these districts.
So kind of a twofold response, Bruce. One is we will be moving next year to actually the 2021 IBC code, which does have a lot more green and lead standards in it. And then also as we go through the ULUC, we will continue to integrate sustainability practices within the code to the extent that we can within a zoning code. But a lot of the things that you're talking about are really addressed in building code,
Right.
which again, we are updating and moving to the 2021, and that process actually has already started, and we're targeting, I think, a May or June of 2021 adoption.
Okay.
Hey, Bruce, if I
That's
might.
That's very true, Bruce, that it's building codes mostly. Some communities have corollaries that they add to whatever IBC edition they're on that go into further depth, but that's up to each individual city. But again, most of that green is typically handled in building code.
Understand. Okay, that makes sense.
And Brett, you had something to add?
Yeah. I've been editing today on that topic, and they're not, flagged as sustainability per se, but there are sustainable provisions all throughout this document relative to,
Yes.
landscaping and pedestrian connectivity and lighting, and I've integrated some more things in terms of low impact development and things like that. So we're infusing more and more zoning related provisions into this. As to LEED buildings, sometimes communities will create some type of density bonus or something like that for buildings that meet, a certain LEED grade, or for Energy Star buildings and things like that. But that's kind of beyond the scope of phase 2 right now.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Okay. I think it's a good parking lot item, and if that's going to end up in the building codes, that's totally appropriate. I just thought it was worth mentioning. Two other questions, mildly probably quick ones. On there was again another citizen comment about, I think, cross-referencing comp plan elements in here, and is that something that we intend to do to sort of close the loop on how the comp plan is flowing into this document, which apparently was something that had been discussed as part of the overall process? Can somebody talk a little bit about that, or is that not something that we intend to do at this point?
So, Bruce, I mean, yeah, the entire phase 2 is starting to reconcile the comp plan with our code, and the ULUC will continue that. But are you specifically talking about like specific references in the code back to our comp plan?
I think, yeah, hypothetically, if does any of that make sense, or is the comp plan more or less too fluid over a period of time to warrant referencing in the code specifically?
Kathleen, do you want to weigh in on that?
Well, just what I'd like to weigh in is, now that we have the comprehensive plan, it is the guiding document for the city, right?
Sure.
So that policy language is what we're trying to translate into a regulatory framework. Those goals, those action steps, this whole process of a unified land use code, which we've slightly modified the scope to get these phase 2 amendments, that is the number one priority defined in the comprehensive plan. I think what we're doing in sort of tandem with this is, if you think about even the goals that council sets out, they have a 2-year work plan. We are indexing every single element of that against action steps or policies or goals. And you can kind of see that in the public dashboard that shows the progress of that plan. So while it isn't a reference sort of in the code, because our hope is that a best practice is you get about 25 years out of a land use code, and the best practice for a comprehensive plan is that you're updating that every 5 years. So our hope is that we'd be cracking the comprehensive plan back open, 2025 timeframe.
Okay, no, that kind of was, I think, what I probably was assuming was going to happen, but I thought it was a fair comment in one of the emails that I just wanted to get clarification on.
Yeah.
And then lastly, on page 55 of the Title 10 document, we're talking about B2 Community Business District. And it talks about, let me read this.
So Bruce, that's our existing code and we didn't touch that.
Okay. All right. Which would
we will touch it in ULUC.
Right. Okay. Then we're back to that again. So yeah, it was a reference to buildings between 100 and 300,000 square foot that had no maximum height, which I was going to suggest was probably something that needs to be addressed. So in any event, very good. That's all I've got.
Yep. The character areas, we'll cover that now.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Bruce. Dan, you're next up with the questions.
I've got one question. It pertains to, it's on page 220 and 221, urban design techniques, table 10.4-18S, applying wall articulation. I don't know if this is just a recommendation and whether staff or council wants to put it in the parking lot for the ULUC, but I think some of these architectural features warrant being able to have a setback encroachment. And I'm sure Ken DeKeist is familiar with what some of those features would be: awnings, cornices, canopies, etc. I know typically those features are allowed to project beyond the setback. So I don't know if that was intentional not to do that or if that is something that is coming.
That is something that is coming.
Okay, right on.
That it? Okay.
Yep.
Jason, you had your hand up.
Or my hand. There we go. I had two questions. One on lighting on page 74. There's a prohibition on rope lighting, and I was just wondering how that interacts with patio lighting, because it's not uncommon to see sort of a rope lighting style patio light. Just hoping we weren't inadvertently prohibiting the type of lighting that is actually currently used at Jackass Hill Brewery on their patio.
That's a good question, Jason. The way it's drafted is they're not to be used to highlight features of the building. Typically, what you see is outlining the interiors of windows and things like that. You raise a good point relative to an outdoor seating area or something like that. So there probably be some added wording there to clarify that.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was inferring from the not used to highlight things on the building. It seemed to be a distinct thing from patio lighting. And the other is a signage question on pages 91, 92. It appears that pole signs of up to 15 feet high and 40 square feet in area are permitted in the downtown transition area, which as a more sensitive area, it seems like that might not be an appropriate sign type. And also in the downtown mixed use, unless maybe the columns got transposed. But the question I have is, could you talk a little bit about the thought of adding pole signs to the downtown area when they're not really prevalent except among the properties that face Santa Fe, and maybe a couple of historic signs, for example, the old formerly known as Adelita's or Merle's building has a pole sign that has been there since the 1930s.
Brian, is that something you can address?
Yeah. So normally we would not probably look at having pole signs in a downtown. And I might have to lean on staff for a second on this too. And I think the commissioner might have mentioned an existing pole sign that maybe would fit within these parameters that are on the page 92. But I think we had some feedback from staff that pole signs, and that's why I say that I think maybe that that there are possibly some pole signs downtown that this is meant to allow to remain, legal and conforming. They are pretty modest, 15 feet in height and a 40 square foot maximum area with halo lighting. I guess, if you're going to have a pole sign, that's some pretty good standards to live up to for them in a downtown. But basically those are again, pretty prescriptive for pole signs. And I guess I would ask just the possibility that there must be some pole signs downtown that are wanting that overall we're wanting to keep there. Does staff have anything to add onto that possibly?
Yeah, I might have Mike Sutherland pop in here too, but that is my recollection of it, that we know they're not prevalent and they're definitely not a sign that we would encourage. But the fact that we had existing pole signs, we felt like we didn't want to prohibit them to create non-conforming signs. But Mike, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think that sums it up, Jennifer. We do have several pole signs in the downtown area, and we can probably look at that more with the ULUC, but didn't think that it would be appropriate to make all of them non-conforming at this point. They are allowed right now.
Now, the thing that can be done would be to maybe allow them to get a little bit more sign area in exchange for doing pole wraps. So rather than having individual poles, you'd have more of a pylon sign. So that's commonly done for pole signs that would dress them up for downtown.
We've got that in there. That would be required regardless, where there's at least 25% of the width of the sign. The support underneath it has to have sort of a wrap, like you mentioned, Brett.
Okay, great.
No, thank you. That's really good clarification. I appreciate it.
Good question.
All done? Okay. Craig, you had your electronic hand up.
Thank you, Chair. Just a few quick clarifying questions. One is, I noticed in the character area descriptions around page 58, 59, the map is showing Little's Creek within the DMU character area, and the description of Little's Creek improvements is in the DTA. I'm just wondering if that's something that hasn't been picked up when the map was changed.
Good catch. We can move that.
Okay. On to the next one. On page 66, 3AI, it talks about parking requirements for multiplexes and apartments and so on. Am I reading that right in that it's basically capping the number of parking spaces per unit to 2? It's one. It says 1 for 1 bedroom, 2 for 2 or more bedrooms. Is that correct? I just want to make sure I'm reading that right.
And Brian, isn't that correct?
That is correct.
Well,
in regards to the tying parking to the number of bedrooms,
the minimum number, yeah.
That basically if it's 2 or more bedrooms, it's 2 parking spaces.
Right. Okay, I just wanted to make sure I was reading that right. Okay.
Yeah. But those are minimums. If someone really wanted to, if a developer really wanted to provide more than 2 spaces for a 2-bedroom, they could, but they don't have to provide any more than 2, which is a bit of a reduction from what is currently required.
Okay, thanks for that, Brian. Let's see. Do we have within the city of Littleton, going to the open space, page 75, 76, open space requirements, there's a number of different ways that a developer can provide their open space requirements. Is there any provision that we have or could have that would allow a developer as part of a project to donate or contribute to a open space project within the downtown area that's not on their property?
In other communities I've worked for, it's called a parkland dedication fee. But Reed, correct me if I'm wrong, I do not believe the city has such a requirement, but Craig, are you suggesting that that might be another way that open space requirement could be met?
Yeah, I'm trying to keep it as a question right now, but yeah, it's another tool in the toolbox, I guess, that might be available, especially for those that have limited properties, like in the DMS or DMU, even the DMU districts, that would benefit the city in other ways by sort of aggregating open space.
I think I'd like to see that as something that we address in the ULUC.
Okay.
Generally, there's parkland dedication requirements, and then there can be an equivalent fee in lieu of those parkland dedication. Generally, because of case law and so forth, there are basically receiving zones so that they are within proximity, near proximity, or relative proximity to the property that might be providing that fee. So if that were to be done in downtown, in other words, it would probably be if somebody provided a fee, that fee would be used within the DT district so that it would be proximate to that user.
Right, which makes sense. Okay. There was one question I had when I was looking at the different types of open space. One of them that was kind of interesting was the parklet, I think the
Pocket park?
The one that's on the street, where you're taking up a parking space. That's not, is that a parklet?
Parklet.
Yeah, parklet.
Yeah. And I just wonder if in the development of that as an idea or as an alternative, if it was considered that you might be losing some on-street parking. I guess it's almost a rhetorical question.
This is Brian. That would be a consideration for sure, because they do, but they're not necessarily permanent, as the general character description shows. So I think there'd have to be some consideration when an applicant is proposing a parklet, how it impacts the parking availability for the vicinity.
So basically, when a development comes in, they're going to have to meet certain requirements. And so let's say, for instance, they build a parking garage. And so they have ample parking for their development. And so they don't need the space out in front. So in that case, they could use that parklet to fulfill their requirement. More times than not, without a parking garage, they're probably going to need that for parking. But that's just another, as you said earlier, kind of another tool in the toolkit of ways that they could fulfill that. This is kind of a growing trend that you're seeing all across the country, particularly right now with pandemics when you're doing outdoor seating and things like that. So we're seeing that as an increasingly popular means of creating some outdoor space.
Thank you. One last quick question here. I noticed in the DNR district, when you get into the building heights and stories, the townhouse is the only one that's not 2.5, 30. And I'm wondering if there's a constructability reason that a townhouse really, it doesn't pencil out if it's, you know, not taller.
I think that's an error, quite frankly, in the table.
Craig, what page is that on?
184.
Okay.
Every other residential use in the former R5 area, now DNR, is 2.5 stories and 30 feet. All of a sudden, the townhomes gets to 3 stories and 45. I think it's fine in the other districts, but not in the DNR.
Thank you. That's all I had.
Any response to that, Jennifer or Brett?
We need to dig into that a little bit more. Nori Winter worked on those tables, so along with some of the other questions we had last week on floor heights and things like that, we've got a list of things that we will be addressing this week.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bezod? Bezod, you're up.
Okay, I'm unmuted. I had a couple of questions. One was, we have a standard for a lot of the front facade of the building, but there's no standard that I could find on the alleyway. And when you go through Littleton and you look at those back alleys, and the back facade is remind me of when you go to a Broadway show and up front everything is nice and tidy and within the character, and you go in the back and it's kind of like a disaster area in downtown Baghdad. So is there a reason we don't have a minimum standard for the back alley building facade?
Brian?
That's a good question. I would say you're not misreading not misreading the tables, sir. That's just not in there. Wasn't really, that I can recall, discussed much at the public engagement sessions we have. I could be misremembering, but it just didn't seem to rise to the surface at that point as a concern, I guess.
Usually,
at least at that time.
Usually in an ordinance, if there are some sort of standards, it would be when that back elevation abuts street right of way, or abuts a public space, or abuts a parking lot or something like that, where it is in direct view of the public. And those that are, you know, out of direct view would have a lesser standard. So that's something that can certainly be looked at if you.
But lesser standard does not exist right now. So if there's a lesser standard, what's the minimum standard? Can I have 16 windows and a couple of tunnels and horse parking lot? The other thing that I did not see is solar panel are allowed in any of the character zone areas, or they are prohibited.
What panel?
Excuse me?
What
solar panel.
Yeah, that's a whole section that will come later in the ULUC.
Okay, the other item that I had question about is loading, unloading, parking, and construction related parking. Right now, there is limited loading and offloading in downtown area especially, and people park in the back alley and they block everything. They, for 30, 45 minutes to a couple of hours, sometimes they park in Main Street and offload and load furniture and so forth. is there any requirement for loading and offloading for businesses and for apartments and so forth? Because these are the things that people go in, move out. There's furniture to move in. Is there a requirement for designating areas for loading and offloading?
I'm looking for that. They're in here.
Yeah, just you can communicate that to me. What's the minimum standard? The other thing that I had issue with was typically when I review any kind of plan of this sort, there's a matrix that come with that and have items such as usefulness, functionality, application, expected result, consequences, advantages, disadvantages, cost benefits, risk analysis. I see a lot of changes here, but I don't see any matrix that you can determine how this rate with that matrix. Are they good? Are they bad? Are they beneficial? Are they advantageous? Are they provide a risk that is a calculated risk? So there are a lot of things here that doesn't have that matrix. So I don't know, is that to come or is that analysis is done? Just a basic question that I have.
Well, I could say generally that language that is provided in this document is best practices from our experience of having done this for me over 30 years and having done it in over 175 communities. So while there is certainly a lot of research and things like that has gone into this, it's uncommon for a development code to go to that level of detail. With that being said, in some cases there is some of that, such as the economic viability study that was done in parallel course with this. That was something that the city asked for, an additional level of detailed analysis. So the standards, you start with the current standards that are in your ordinance today, look at the policies and the intention of what is in the comprehensive plan and what has been heard from the community, and then start crafting language that is a lot more, articulate and definitive so that you get outcomes on the ground that you expect. So that would be my response to that.
Well, I disagree. I think with any proposal, there should be those analysis done. How do the public know, something, your experience, I appreciate. There is a lot of experience in this panel, but I think those analyses need to be done and public need to be aware of those. So the decision is made up based on a matrix, a measurement, a tool. I appreciate that you have a lot of experience, but that experience is not specifically for City of Littleton. And I think that kind of matrix needs to be included for future changes.
I think now that I hear you a little bit more, what you may be referring to is the section of the Unified Land Use Code that will be on, all the procedures and, each different permit type. A lot of that stuff is included in checklists and, application requirements and things of that nature. So the procedures for all these different development types will have, much of that, the analysis that goes into determining, the warrant for a particular type of project. So
no, my comments are basic than that. For example, let's say we're changing the parking space from ratio of 2.5 to 1 to 1.1. What is the impact of that? What's the advantage of that? What's the economy of that? What's the impact to the local businesses and so forth? I don't know what that analysis is done. What's the cost benefit of that? What's the financial burden of that to the community? Same as, for example, when we're changing from 3-story to 4-story, what's the beneficial financial or disadvantage of that to affordable housing, for example? These are the things that, yeah, everybody is saying, okay, we want 3-story because, all of us have certain preferences for downtown, but without doing that kind of analysis, it's just personal opinion what looks good. What looks good, it might be not functional and beneficial to the community. That was the point I was trying to communicate.
Yeah, relative to downtown, that analysis was done with the economic viability study that was done, and that was used to calibrate, building heights and parking ratios and things based upon economic viability in the market, construction costs. So those are very detailed and sophisticated models that were put together, and that is in part how a lot of these numbers were derived, because we want to make sure that the numbers that are in this document are something that can actually be built in real life. So parking ratios, for instance, were reduced because when that factors in, that was one of the sensitivities. Building height was a sensitivity as to whether or not projects would be economically viable. So that was a whole separate study that was done outside of this process, but that input, where was collaboration between us and this other consultant to draft the regulations that are here. So
but that analysis was not included for us to review or for public to see. Is that available for public to see?
We will have a written document. Yeah, go ahead, Kathleen.
Yeah, I was going to say we will have a technical memo that we can share. It was the subject of your joint study session on June 30th. And so that was the presentation for both City Council and Planning Commission. And then we are also bringing back that same consultant team to have further conversation with City Council on the 22nd of September. So that would be another opportunity for Planning Commission to tune in and see some of the update relative to that model. I think there is a desire on the part of council to better understand some of the more intricate workings of how the model takes the inputs that it takes and then how that pushes out that level of analysis. So I think they want to dig in a little bit deeper. Some of that will become very clear through the technical memo as well. But that was, if you remember, on the 30th of June, that was a joint study session for both Planning Commission and City Council.
Yeah, I mean, the slide was good, but I think you need to get to nuts and bolts, and that was never published. And the data, raw data and so forth, was not tabularized, and analysis was not presented in a report. You put some slides up, and to tell you the truth, is those slides good, but I don't know it supports some of the changes that you presented in this document. So I think we are putting the cart in front of the horse. I think that technical memo and any studies, sensitivity, feasibility, functionality, so forth, should be published before the changes are decided and voted on. So I think we're jumping the gun a little bit here.
Well, that'll be provided for City Council for their next study session on the 22nd and in anticipation of the first reading of the amendments. So we're happy to share that with Planning Commission as well. So we anticipate that going out publicly next week.
Okay, that was my comment. Thank you.
Thank you.
David.
Yes, I just have a clarification or question on a clarification. I know that at some point someone said in one of these meetings that we were getting rid of the word xeriscape because people think it means zeroscape, and in favor of low water gardening. And I just wanted a clarification, is that still going forward? Do we back off on that? Because this document's peppered with those words, xeriscape.
Yeah, I think we decided low maintenance, didn't we? Low maintenance landscape.
Well,
Low maintenance, low water.
There is a mention of low water, but it's only mentioned in concert with Xeriscape, and then Xeriscape is in every other reference.
Yeah, that hasn't been, that's what we're working on this week to have done for the council by next Monday.
Okay.
So,
There's something.
Yep, that was one of the outcomes of the study session, that we would address that.
Oh, okay. There's something really cool called copy replace. Is that what it's called? Something like that.
Never heard of that.
Find and replace. I mean,
Sometimes that'll bite you, though.
No, I know. I'm just teasing. Okay, no, that's good. I just was curious about that. Okay, thanks.
No, thank you for bringing that up. That will be addressed, and kind of what we classify that as a typographical item that KKC is fixing.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, I've got the only other hand up. I should have mentioned that there'll be no continuation tonight. We've been instructed by the gods that be that we're going to keep this meeting going until we get to a final vote. There's no time for a continuation to next week. So that might have an impact on how much time you take. Also, I want to mention that we are dealing with a draft number 2. A lot of the comments we made individually and in the joint session with City Council are not in this document. So there's a little bit of leap of faith here, the faith that the staff will incorporate our comments into the final draft that City Council looks at 2 or 2 or 3 weeks now. Freudian slip. And obviously after tonight, you're still more than welcome to send in pepper in your comments, questions, requests for changes up until the last minute. Be the squeaky wheel. So I'll be brief because I asked you all to be brief. 2 questions. One is the parking requirement for hotels is not listed in the parking requirements. So I'm assuming the parking for hotels, 1 space per unit and 1 space for management will still be in the code as is. Is that correct? Or is it reduced amongst these other reductions for commercial restaurants, et cetera?
Unless it's otherwise stated in the downtown district, the parking requirements kind of piggyback off of your existing parking requirements that are further down in the code.
Okay. So for the record, hotels stay the same.
It's probably covered under overnight accommodations, right? Brian?
Yeah, if that's one of the, if I didn't check, if overnight accommodations is one of the called out, 3 or 4 called out uses or use categories that has a differentiated parking requirement in downtown, then that would control. I'm trying to navigate over to that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure hotels are staying the same.
Okay, I'm going to take that for the record. I'll move on. Second question, I want to go back to the townhouse building allowance, or building type allowed on page 184, 3 stories and 45 feet, when the rest of the residential in the former R5, now the DNR district, is 2.5 stories and 30 feet. It looks like that's just an omission. It's a residential type style unit. It should be the same as all the others. Nowhere in the DNR are we going above 30 feet for any usage and 2.5 story. So do I have your assurance that you're going to take care of that? Do I have to make an amendment?
So Brent and Brian, I'm going to look to you. That I know we were going to check in with Nori, but I'm thinking if we don't know for sure, they probably Planning Commission should make an amendment if this is a concern. It
is a concern. We've gone to great lengths of protecting the the DNR area, basically keeping it the same, other than a minor side setback requirement. It used to be 5 feet and 10 feet. Now it's 5 feet and 5 feet on the north and south side typically. So other than that, everything else pretty much stays the same. Actually, the maximum lot coverage has gone down, so that's good news for the former R5 area. That's all the questions I have. I see no other hands up. Is there anybody else that wants to make any comments of a technical nature?
Mark, I do think Brett wanted to respond to that your last question on the height.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you, Mark. If you look at all of the photos and all of the illustrations and everything, they're all reflecting 2-story. So that could be a remnant from something weeks or months ago. I don't know, but we will. Yeah, if you want to make an amendment to that, please do, and then we'll address it.
Yeah, we'll get into kind of ground rules for amendments here when we get closer to that. Anything else of staff? Seeing none, we're going to take a little break here. Then we're going to open up to don't jump the gun on the vote. We'll take let's take a 10-minute or 7-minute break. Be quick, and then we'll get into the public comment. The motion and the amendments could get quite lengthy here, so we'll take our break now. Come back in 7 minutes. Now we're going to open the meeting to public comment. Colleen, can you give your standard speech there?
Thank you, Chair. Happy to. If you would like to speak on this topic during the public hearing and you're not already in the queue, please call 669-900-6833. And when prompted, enter the webinar ID 940-2310-2017. Once on the line, press *9 to raise your hand to be recognized. We currently have 3 callers in the queue. I don't have any hands up. I have 1 hand up. 3 callers in the queue. The caller with the last 3 phone number digits of 212 have been unmuted. Please press *6 to begin speaking, and please remember to identify yourself.
Good evening, members of the Littleton Planning Commission. I'm Pat Cronenberger, District 2, and I'm here to comment on the code amendments as a member of South Metro Housing Options Board and the city's Housing Task Force. As you know, like you, the SMHO board is appointed by the City Council. The task force is part of the City Council's work plan and includes a variety of public and private sector folks. Due to the solid partnership we've developed with the city, SMHO has been entrusted with leading the task force. We are very grateful for Kathleen Osher's involvement in this work and for our great partnership with the City Council. We are very, very focused on the recommendations of the BBC housing study that the city commissioned in 2017. Those recommendations were incorporated in the Envision Comp Plan. One of the recommendations of the housing study was to set up the housing task force, and we're busy fleshing out those recommendations to give specific guidance on housing in order to fulfill the comp plan's goals to meet the need for over 6,000 housing units in the next 20 years. In the feedback we provided you before the July 31 comment deadline, and I understand you got the letter only today, we did emphasize, among other things, allowing higher density with up to 5-story buildings. We are very much in agreement with the city's economic consultant, Andy Knudsen, about the need for flexibility in height as this facilitates more housing and better projects. This is crucial if we want better designed projects and projects that meet the needs of people of all ages and incomes. In a time of diminishing resources and exponentially increasing needs, Littleton has to be sure its land use is contributing to making Littleton economically sustainable. We understand, though, that height is a tough issue given the other comp plan goals about community character. In conclusion, SMHO and the task force support the code amendments along with the Historic Preservation Board, which approved them last week. We urge you to forward them to the City Council as drafted. The code is long overdue and is a gigantic leap forward to ensuring the city gets the projects it wants and deserves. Thank you for all of your hard work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. The next caller on the line, caller with the last 3 phone number digits of 693. Okay, that hand went down. Caller with the last 3 phone number digits of 819. You have been unmuted. Please press *6. Please remember to unmute yourself, *6, and identify yourself for the commission. Please begin speaking now.
Hi, my name is Pam Chapman. I live downtown. Nobody in City Council or Planning Commission lives downtown. Pat Cronenberger does not live downtown. We don't need 5-story buildings downtown to meet the city's need for additional housing. We need alternatives to spread density over a mile area instead of a quarter mile. And that's very doable. And we were not presented with any of those design alternatives at the city level in the Envision project, which is a joke, a bad one and a painful one on all of us and all future residents of Littleton. But let me say, I thank you all for your review and comments, and overall, you found a lot of mistakes. I've said in my comments that we should have had a draft, preliminary, and final version of this document, and this one has one go. This is a deficient and defective process that is not standard of practice. I do not have confidence in Kendon Keast, and I'm going to talk about that more. I want to understand who the gods are that directed that this has to go to a final vote. I think the moratorium can be extended. If there's a lawsuit behind the scenes, I want to see the city bring it. The city will win it. We need to get this right. So when Bezide mentions the matrix, it is not from the developer's point of view. The analysis matrix must be from the city's point of view. And we have never done that. Kathleen Osher has never had that in the process. We, the people, have never understood, or you, the decision makers, have never been presented with an analysis of the pros and cons to the city, of the risks and the mitigations necessary for the city. I don't care what the current developers want.
30 seconds.
This is for 60 years, guys. The current market is not what we cater to. Littleton is special. It is different. If you say that we're going to welcome all the Alameda Broadway developers to Littleton, you will destroy what we have. And that's interesting to see what you'll do. But this should be disapproved. It's not ready for prime time. It's full of errors. We don't understand the impact on Littleton and whether it will destroy us or not. I live down here. I don't want it. And you have almost no downtown people in your community outreach in spite of what Mr. Keith says. Send us postcards and tell us what's there. There are rezonings in the map. Take it out. Thanks very much.
Colleen, any other speakers?
Chair, I have no other callers in the queue with their hand raised at this time. The only other caller in the queue has already spoken. There are no other callers in the queue.
By the way, we had, I spoke to Reed during our break. We had 2 callers that were cut off when we got into general comments. When we finish this this public hearing, we'll allow them to come back on for their 3 minutes, if that's okay with everyone. Anybody have a problem with that? Seeing no thumbs down, we will do so. So I'll close the public comment portion. It looks like about 8:32. We'll go to motions, seconds, and amendments. By the way, one other thing before we get to the motion is there's 2 types of things in my mind here. We have recommendations versus amendments. Recommendations that you might have concerning wordsmith, minor corrections, semi-minor problems. If you could please, we have to trust staff on this. Please send your comments in, written comments in to staff, and make sure that they get into the final draft that's going to be sent to council. If it's an important issue, then we will go, obviously you can go to the amendment process. And again, amendments will be, we'll have the main motion. Amendments will be one at a time, and we'll vote on, and by the way, keep the amendments to a single topic. We'll have a vote on the amendment, and then we'll go to the next amendment till we're all done, and we'll go back to the main motion. So, do we have a motion?
Chair, I move to approve PC Resolution 05-2020, recommending approval of Phase 2 amendments to Title 10 of the City Code relative to downtown development.
Looks like David is the second. Okay. Unusual way of saying so. Okay. Discussion and amendment time.
Is that legal?
I saw you. It's all good.
David is always doing kind of weird things, right? So give him some latitude. Again, if you have amendments, let's go ahead and raise your hand. each person will have one amendment. We'll go to the next person, then we'll come back to you if you have a second one. That's how we'll work here. So, hands up. David, you have a hand up, maybe left over from the technical comments. Any comment? Any amendments? Okay. Robin, go ahead. And just, again, one amendment, and then we'll go down the line. And then we'll come back.
Fine. So I would like to talk about DTA. So right now, the DTA includes Alamo, and it is allowed to have 4 stories as mixed use, and only the mixed use. I would like to remove having 4 stories from the DTA. My condition would be remove the 4 stories from the DTA. It comes from when we were talking about Alamo and one of our past meetings where we discussed not wanting to have more than 3 stories.
Could you state your amendment, please? And then
that was to remove 4 stories from DTA.
Period. Okay.
Yep.
We have a second. Anyone raising their hand here? For discussion purposes, I'll go ahead and raise my hand. Discussion? And I'll just open it up to anyone. Anybody? Seeing none. Bruce. Okay, yeah. Bruce. Last second.
Yeah, Robin, respectfully, I think per what we heard from South Metro Housing and the fact that it is a transition area, I think we've got enough that in the process here with everything we've looked at that 4 stories doesn't bother me. So I'm inclined to probably not support your amendment. No disrespect.
None taken.
Anyone else? Let's not belabor it. We'll have a vote. All in favor of Robin's amendment on limiting DTA to 3 stories? I think you said.
Thumbs up for a yes, thumbs down for a no. Robin, I can't see your hand, hon. The vote is 1 in favor. The motion fails.
Anyone else? No? Guess it's my turn. This is going to be a dry motion. I'm using the language that's in the ULAC portion. This concerns parking. An applicant may utilize the following parking credits and reductions of required parking in order to reduce the minimum off-street surface parking spaces required for an applicable development by a maximum of 20%. Currently, the number is 50%. My reasoning behind this is there are already parking reductions of sometimes less than half what is currently in the zoning code, especially for retail, restaurants, and a couple other ones. Office, for some reason, has stayed the same. So there's already reductions in the main body of the ULAC. But I think putting in these credits and reductions, basically going from requiring half the parking, and then you go to a 50% reduction, you got half of that, so you got a quarter of the parking required new versus what it's required now. That to me is too much. So I'm asking that 50% go to 20% max. Still quite a change from the parking requirement we have now.
Second.
We have a second?
Second.
Is that Bruce? Okay. Any other discussion? Just raise your hand and verbally or on screen. Go ahead, Dan.
Just curious, why 20%? I mean, is there a resource or something that inform 20%?
No, it's me thinking that reduction could be moderate versus, I think, excessive. Just a gut reaction to the reduction. Again, going from 100% down to 50% and possibly down to 25% of what's there now. The point being, who makes up for it eventually? It doesn't happen right away that we have a parking problem, but increasingly, if we allow reduced parking and greater density, greater height, parking is going to get worse and worse. Somebody's got to make it up somewhere. Guess who the somebody is? And your guess is as good as mine where the money comes from to do it. Obviously, the city's going to have to come up with some solutions. So, no, I didn't throw a dart, but careful consideration. I could have gone to 10%, 25%. I came to the 20%.
Thank you.
Other comments? Jason.
Sure. Thank you, Chair. I won't be supporting this amendment for a couple of reasons. I think I really appreciate your concern about parking, and I know the community is concerned about parking in general downtown. However, it is a unique area with a lot of opportunities for walkability, and the standards that people have to meet in the code in order to qualify for that up to 50% reduction are fairly rigorous. It says you have to be near the light rail station. You have to provide something else in addition to the minimum parking. So I think with those standards in place, there is that safety net there. The people getting that reduction are doing so because they're doing something else that will benefit the community. The other reason I won't be supporting this is actually, some of the parking requirements may be overparked. According to the ITE manual for parking, an apartment only needs 0.58 spaces per bedroom, and we're requiring 1 space per bedroom. So, given that our baseline, at least for that particular use, is a little higher than it needs to be, I think that the outlet there is really useful to have. And a third reason is I've actually seen codes where you can adjust parking administratively by a reduction of up to 20% without any real standards.
I have no trouble with apartments. Yeah, actually, we're increasing apartment parking. Right now, the rule is 1 space per unit. Now 1.5 spaces per unit. Now we're proposing 1 space for 1 bedroom, 2 spaces for 2 and up. So it's basically, maybe a draw here. Although if you put in 3 bedrooms, then you only have 2. So as far as I think some of these carrots that were, parking credits and reductions are based on pie in the sky compliance. You set up a ride sharing plan, you set up, bus passes, et cetera. Next owner of the building, he just kind of fades away with the next owner of the building or the present owner. And it's very rarely ever enforced on a long-term basis. Just a small counter argument to what you said. Any other, Robin?
I do support this. I think further study is needed to see how the effects will be. Not to say that in the future, when this is finalized, that it won't be reinstated. I just want caution in the beginning until there is enough study to show the effects it will have on the city, because the community is very concerned about parking. I think that should be honored until we have the opportunity to say, yes, it's okay with this percentage. And so I support the 20% at this point.
Any other comment? Well, you've got the amendment. All those in favor, raise your thumb so we can see it. Oh, close.
Sorry about that. I've got to be able to see all your thumbs. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 in favor, 3 against. The motion carries.
Before I go back to Robin, because I know she has other amendments, anyone else have an amendment they want to bring up? Robin, you're up. Oh, Greg, did you raise your hand? Unmute.
Sorry, I done unmute there yet. It's related to that. It has to do with the parking reductions, and it's directly related to page 70, 6D, paragraph 6D, which is in regards to the location of shared parking facilities. Currently says that they'll be located within 300 feet, which is generally a city block. I would like to make a motion that we change 300 feet to 1,320 feet, 1,320 feet, which is a quarter-mile walking distance, mainly to provide more flexibility in terms of providing that parking, so we don't end up with, as you know, in downtown, available space is pretty tight, and for somebody to be able to find an empty lot within 300 feet or even build a structure within 300 feet is going to really restrict their ability to do that. So I think that this would promote additional flexibility in providing shared parking opportunities in downtown.
Could you state your amendment again?
Sure. Make a motion that we amend 6D, paragraph 6D on page 70 to change shared parking shall be located within 300 feet to shared parking shall be located within 1,320 feet of the associated use, measured the same as the rest of the paragraph states.
We have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, Bruce says a second. Any discussion? Raise your hand, speak up. Seeing no hands. 3, 2, 1. Let's vote. All in favor, or if you're in favor, raise your thumb or lower your thumb if you're against it.
The vote is 6 in favor. The motion carries.
Sorry, Craig. Payback time, right? Okay. Let's see. Anybody else before I get back to Robin? Seeing none. Robin, you're up.
I have a couple of things with the map. I'm going to separate them out. It might be helpful to have slide 18 up. I don't know, or people remember slide 18. Did you have something, Mark?
Yeah, Robin, you're going to do one area at a time, okay?
Yes, I am. So I would like...
Just your amendment will be one area, and then we'll get back to you for your second area, okay?
Yes, I agree to that.
Thank you.
So my condition would be to extend the white hatched area south to include the east side of Prince up to the DTA.
Or maybe you should say probably down to the DTA in this case.
Yeah, down, south, whatever. It would basically then just go along where the DNR is to keep there a little more protection for the DNR. There's the, if you look at, it's on page 58, if you look at the map itself. I'm sorry, let me get that up.
Robin, hang on one second. Hey,
yeah,
Brian, can you bring up the character map, please?
And while he's doing that, Robin, is it all the way to Sycamore Street, or is it only the properties that are facing the east side?
It is only the properties that face the east. It's only the properties on the east side of Prince, not any farther, just the property that faces the DNR.
Thank you.
So nothing to do with anything beyond that east side of Prince. And the idea is you have DMU there and you have potential for 5-story buildings. And if we have talked about, the DNR, we have the hatched area that pretty much surrounds the DNR at the top. So this would just simply draw it down until we hit the DTA.
Whoop, okay. Can everybody see the map and understand the area that Robin's talking about? I don't see faces, so speak up if you don't understand.
Does that extend eastward to Sycamore? That was the question earlier.
No, this would strictly be on Prince, just on the east side of Prince, but not going any farther.
Okay.
So it would just be along the side of the DNR, nothing else.
Just the lots that front on Prince.
Right.
Yes.
So properties abutting Prince between Berry and Powers.
Correct.
So, Robin, you probably change your motion to include that if you would. Say it again. Go ahead and say it again.
All right. To extend the white hatched area south to include only the east side of Prince up to the DTA. Do we need more clarification? I mean,
yes, I think you need to say that it's properties facing Prince Street, south from Berry down to West Powers.
All right, so the white hatched area to include south of Berry up to Powers, the east side of Prince only facing the DNR.
Okay. Okay, can you take the map off the screen? Thank you. Do we have a second? I'll go ahead and second. Discussion? Raise your hand if you want. Dan?
Yeah, I'm just looking at the language in the proposed DMU or mixed use building type in that particular zone. And it already incorporates you can only have 2 stories max along Prince Street because the DNR is a sensitive edge. If there are buildings that extend up to 65 feet, 5 stories, the 4th floor and the 5th floor would still have to step back even further from the 3rd floor. So I think it's kind of the nice thing about this code is that it is sort of forcing your hand that you're going to have bulk reduction along that sensitive edge already. So respectfully, I will decline the motion.
Craig, I think you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I think Dan hit on it a little bit. I guess I have a concern just looking at that block between Powers and Berry that at least one of the properties there goes all the way through from Prince to Sycamore. So that would impact that entire property. And it's not a clean block in terms of having an alley and a split on either side. And I think that's why, and in conjunction with what Dan just mentioned, I don't think I would support this motion for that reason.
Yeah, I had a problem with that property in the middle of the block that goes all the way through from Prince to Sycamore. So you'd be splitting it in half, which would be quite awkward. Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, we have the motion, and we had my second. No further discussion. Let's vote. Thumbs up for yes and thumbs down for no.
The vote is 1 in favor, 6 against. The motion fails.
No, I have my
Two in favor.
2.
There's 2 in favor.
2 in favor, sorry. I'm having trouble seeing Robin's thumb. She's kind of down in the corner.
I thought she voted against her own amendment.
I've seen it happen.
Robin, tilt your screen or up higher.
I guess I'm fuzzy a little. There you go.
I have another amendment, but does anybody want to go in front of me? Okay. My amendment number 2, I'm going to wade into heights here because nobody else will. here's the motion. For all permitted building types in the downtown mixed-use character area, maximum stories permitted shall be 4, with a maximum height of 55 feet.
Second.
Okay. Reasoning behind it is, again, I always go back to the existing zoning code. We basically have 2 districts. We have a little B2, which is unlimited heights, but it's a very small area west of Main Street, west end of Main Street and north, quite a bit north. The R5 area is 30-foot height limit. The vast majority of downtown is CA, which allows 40-foot height limit, 3-story. I guess that to my mind, 65 feet is not, not reasonable, not moderate. It's a 25-foot increase in the heights. And yes, you could give the argument about the step backs, undulation of facades, both the front and the tops of the buildings, etc. But I still think it's excessive. And I guess a lot of this came up when the economic viability of a project. To my mind, well, economic viability is okay. We need more power in America. Let's dam up the Colorado River at the Grand Canyon. Oh no, we sometimes make decisions that we don't want to do that for the sake of the particular area. Downtown, it has a particular character, low, moderate density, less than other areas, but that's downtown Littleton. I think the 65-foot 5-story is excessive for the mixed-use area. Do I have a second? Any other discussion?
Say the amendment again.
Oh, okay. For all permitted building types in the downtown mixed-use character area, maximum stories permitted shall be 4, with a maximum height of 55 feet, period. The way the code reads now is it's a 5-story and with a maximum height of 65 feet. So, yeah. David? What is that? We already have a second.
Oh, we do have a second. I didn't realize.
I think it was
I
Bruce,
don't have
right?
everybody on my screen.
Okay.
Yes, it was Commissioner Stallman.
Any
I'm just
other?
saying peace then.
Seeing no other hands raised for discussion, time to vote.
Ooh.
Thumbs up for yes.
Jason had one.
What? Sorry, who?
Jason.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I think I appreciate the thought on sort of the character and the relatively low heights in certain areas of town, and I think that's exactly what the code as written does by preserving our main street and setting really rigorous standards there, and setting the areas that are further afield from Alamo and Main Street as areas that could potentially go higher. And especially the areas that are south of Alamo, close to the light rail station, are areas that would benefit greatly from having more mixed-use buildings and more housing close to such a wonderful transit hub. And as the housing options folks have pointed out, is there is a very large need for housing. And since we moved one of the levers by saying we want more parking by reducing some of the potential alternatives, I see this as also reducing potential housing further and increasing the expense of housing in Littleton if it were adopted.
Yes, maybe my counter argument would be, how much do we want to stuff into downtown? There are other areas of the city where you can put higher stories under existing zoning rules and regulations. A lot of the properties around Littleton are still underdeveloped according to what they can do legally. Why does it all have to be downtown? Everybody wants to be there. What are you going to do? We're going to love our downtown to death. In my mind, combine that with the parking, lessen parking, and the increase in the heights and density. To me, it's a cocktail for what's the word?
Charming,
deck of down-
walkable community.
All right. Okay. Won't belabor the point. Yeah. Craig.
I also am not sure that I can support this amendment, mainly because I do think if we are going to put additional height, that downtown is the right place for it. I think in public comment, it was mentioned, hey, you know what, look within a quarter mile, why don't you look within a mile or 2 miles or throughout the city? And I think, you know, with a transit hub, which is unique to Littleton, and a walkable community where you can walk to support local businesses. I think it is the one place within our city that is best suited to handle that additional height. I understand the sensitivity to heights. It's not the way it has been. I certainly think that any height should remain below our, you know, sacred landmark of the old mill. But I think that there are protections in place in this code that allows for transitions and incentives that this could be done with good design, which I think is the critical component. It's got to be designed well at the street.
Anyone else? Robin?
I agree with Mark.
Okay. Anyone else? Time to vote. Thumbs up for yes and thumbs down for no. Whoa.
The vote is 2 in favor, 5 against. The motion fails.
Okay. Anyone else before I go back to Robin? Seeing none. Robin, you're up.
Just one more. I would like to recommend to council that the green space be based on district and not uniform across. So right now in the green space, there's lots of things like balconies and roof terraces and decks and that sort of thing that may be applicable in some areas, you know, more downtown, but not necessarily in the D and R. So I'd like to see that separated out to not include some of those things in the DNR section. But at this point, I'm simply saying that the green space should be based on district.
We have a second?
I'll second her.
Okay. Any discussion? Just raise your hand and go ahead. Dan?
Where is there somewhere specifically where in the code that you're proposing to change? Is there a page or something that I could look at?
This is on page 76. And here, let me get to it also. So right now, if you look on page 76 for the private open spaces, you go down about 4 lines, it looks like. It allows terrace, decks, porches, and roofs. And if you go down to the open space categories, that's E, it allows balconies, roof terrace, and pools. So while I do agree that that could potentially be well for some areas of downtown, I don't think it is well for areas such as the DNR.
Thank you.
A bit confused. Can you read, say your motion again?
That the green space, the open space, they use both words in this. Green space, open space. Oops, I'm sorry, I lost it. I put down that it should be based on district, but I maybe a better way of saying this would be that until further study can be done to remove the balconies, roof terrace decks, patios, and pools from green space, and to base the green space then on district. So you can be more specific to what you want in it.
We
But not
we have a second, so Bruce, you'd have to withdraw your second, and Robin has to withdraw your amendment and state it again. Bruce, what do you want to do?
Sure, I'll withdraw the second if you're so inclined, Robin.
Sure, what the heck.
Robin, give it another shot.
All right.
You want to take some time, and I have one more, and then come back to it. Gather your thoughts.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, I think that would be helpful. I only have one more, and that is again concerning the townhomes in the DNR area. In the DNR area, townhomes shall be limited to 2.5 stories and a maximum height of 30 feet.
Second. Oh, Craig beat me.
Who was the second? I'm sorry.
Craig.
Craig was the second. Any reasons behind it is I think it's just a technical error that Brett agreed to, that all the other residential uses that are only thing allowed in the DNR area are all 2.5 story and 30-foot height. And for some reason, townhomes slipped through at 3 story and 45 feet. If I were a bungalow and something coming in at 30 foot is one thing, but something coming in at 40 feet high, again, even with the setbacks, et cetera, build to, it's still, to me, a problem and a mistake. Yeah, Dan?
I agree with you, Mark. Notice that as well. I think, as you said, DNR consistently is 30 feet and would support a maximum of 30 feet, or 2.5 stories, 30 feet.
Yes. Any other discussion? Seeing none. Thumbs up, yes. Thumbs down, no.
The vote is unanimous, 7 in favor.
Even got David. Okay. All right, Robin, we'll go back to you. I think you had just this one more.
Yeah, it is. Honestly, I'm not quite sure how to say it. I haven't really come up with anything better.
Well, do you want to keep it as is just something to send to staff rather than make an amendment? It's up to you. You know, a recommendation.
Sure. Yeah, we'll skip it.
Okay. Anyone else with any amendments? Okay, Craig.
Yeah, I have one more, and I think it's kind of related to what Robin was suggesting. I think maybe not exactly the same, but it has to do with the open space requirements and the rooftop garden credit. As I understand it, there's a credit for open space if you put it on your roof in certain districts. And I think that needs to be clarified, and that the credit should be associated with the different district. So the motion would be, and it's on page 78 under rooftop garden, that full credit for meeting open space requirements can be provided through use of a rooftop garden, and just specifically rooftop garden within the DMS, the Main Street Zone, and that a partial credit would be allowable in a DTA and DMU zone, and that no credit would be allowed in the DNR zone. Might have to restate that, but does that make sense?
Well, when you say partial credit, maybe you should put a number to it, and you're going to have to say it again. It's a little tough to follow.
And I did have a number in mind. The motion would read amend the rooftop garden credit to be full credit for rooftop garden provided in the DMS character area. partial 25% credit in the DTA and DMU character areas, and 0 credit in the DNR neighborhood character area, period.
That's quite succinct. Okay. Do we have a second? Bruce, once again, got the 2 fingers up. Any discussion? Bruce?
I guess, yeah, the a question, Craig, would just be, why don't you, as opposed to the, 25% credits, why not do 50% credits? What was your thinking?
Yeah, it's a good question. I actually started with 50% and I went to 25%. The credit is, I think, in my opinion, needs to be fully effective in the Main Street area where you're limited with opportunities outside the building for open space, right? And on the other hand, in the neighborhood, you have plenty of open space just by the setback and density requirements of that neighborhood. So we're looking at mixed use and transition areas. I'd like to incentivize them to do at-grade open space that's more accessible to the public. And I'm concerned that by giving too much credit for rooftop decks, that it's going to be only for exclusive use of the tenants or residents of that building. So I'd hate to discourage good improvements at the street level.
Fair point. Well presented. Thank you.
Any other? Yes. Jason?
Would have maybe one technical quibble is that the DNR area appears to always require 512 or steeper pitched roofs, and the rooftop garden definition says it's only applicable for very gently sloped or flat roofs. It's probably belt and suspenders, but
good point.
I think you could. I've done it all the time where you have a 5 or 6 or 812 pitch, and you tuck in, like in the back, a balcony or that has maybe could even be green space. So it could happen and still meet I think the general intent of a roof slope. Any other comments, discussion? Seeing none, let's vote again. Up or down?
The vote is 7 in favor. The motion carries unanimously.
Okay. Any other amendments? So we're back to the main motion, and we have a second. I'm going to go down the line and ask everyone for finding of fact summaries. Dan, we'll start with you. Jason, you're up next.
Well, I've read this thing probably like you several times, and have participated in several joint study sessions with Planning Commission, with HPB. I've also shared comments with the city, participated on the online survey. I felt like my voice has been heard. There's definitely some comments in the draft that I've made. Some of them were there, and so. Again, I feel like I've been heard, and we know that council is going to be looking at this again. It sounds like at least 2 more times. So even though there are some little editorial errors and things that need to be revised, I feel that I'll be in support of recommending to forward it to Planning Commission or to City Council for review.
Jason, you're up. Bruce, you're next.
All right, thank you. Just want to really thank staff and the whole team for the amount of work that they put into this. This checks a lot of boxes, I think, that have been pain points for the downtown area Although not specifically defined in the code, the building forms eliminate the possibility of slot homes through this zoning code. As stated earlier, there's more green than is currently required. It recognizes that parkings in downtowns are a unique thing that should be treated differently from the rest of the city. And I think it also provides a nice balance of promoting some opportunities for development in the downtown neighborhood while preserving things that make it special, such as the lower heights and requiring pitched roofs. And also want to give credit to the team for the amount of outreach they did. There were plenty of opportunities for us to comment, even if we hadn't been on Planning Commission, through the various online surveys, and just really appreciated the process and how quickly it was accomplished.
Thank you. Bruce, you're up. Craig, you're next up.
I think the watchword here is balance. As throughout this process, there have been extraordinary efforts to get community input into it. I mean, I think we've heard all sorts of feedback from a wide variety of citizens, as well as organizations like South Metro Housing Options, which have, various people have espoused less height, less density, so forth and so on. Others have espoused somewhat more height, somewhat more density. I think the whole concept of economic sustainability is an important attribute to what we're trying to accomplish, because it's the lifeblood of the community at some level. And as with everything we do, I think we try to be fair. I think we try to listen to all the opinions and take them and incorporate them into our deliberations. And ultimately, I think this effort and project and the approach and the product has been appropriately balanced. And I always worry that perfect is the enemy of good. And I think what we've got here is a very strong outcome to a very diverse project. And I'm fully supportive of the outcome. Thank you.
Craig, you're up. I think we'll go ahead and let Sherry, even though you're not voting, we're going to go ahead and let you make comment. Is that okay with staff?
Oh, it's okay with me.
Reed, is that okay? I think I want to hear from them. I semi-shook his head, so we're going to go ahead. Craig, you're up.
I didn't see a thumbs up, but I just want to say, too, I think we've worked very hard to be thorough. We've done a lot of legwork, including touring different areas of downtown multiple times, and a tremendous amount of input, and the staff has been just incredible to work with. I would recommend supporting Phase 2, and knowing with the knowledge that we do have a lot of editing and changes that we have gone through extensively, and I have confidence those will be made by staff and that they will be approved. And then also looking forward to the next phase where we can cover some of those topics that are huge topics, like attainable housing, the historic overlay district, looking at that more closely, sustainability, some of those huge topics that we've hit upon. So I think everyone's done a tremendous job. I support. Thank you.
Greg, you're up, and then David.
Okay, thank you. Well, yes, I do support this approval. I trust the process. This was a very good, strong, I think, open, transparent, rigorous process that we've gone through over the past several months, and I appreciate the folks that worked very hard on that and brought it to us and listened to us, and it really was a conversation. As others have said, I've read through the document several times. I've read all the public comments, and there is concern. There's concern out in the community of change. But I think the failure to change over the past 40 some odd years since the last code was written is why we're here now. Is times have changed, and we need to act differently, I think, to protect what we have and enhance it and allow it to live into the future as we all dream that it should. I intend to provide some additional comments to staff just on some of the details that I've seen in the next couple of days, and it's recognizing it's a work in progress, and even as we get past the code amendments into the ULUC, there'll be opportunities to make it better. So, thank you.
David, you're up. Behzad, you're next up.
Just looking at this, what's been done so far, it's obvious that a lot of work's gone into it, and there's been a lot of opportunity for people to weigh in, and as Bruce said, it's not necessarily perfect, but it's a good solid step in the right direction. And to me, it's just evident of how much we have left to do. So I guess I support it, if I must.
I'm sorry.
Again,
No,
I have reviewed the codes and and the proposed changes 3 times, and there are a lot of different formatting issues and clarity of the language. But I still stand by the comments that I made, that for major portion of changes, there is no analysis done and written that you can refer back to. So when somebody said the height of the building has to go from 65 to 55, I cannot put my finger to say what the impact is 10 years from now, 15 years from now. And I appreciate everybody that basically they have gut feelings or they have preferences and they have bias towards certain things. But this is a city. This is the future of a city. This is people that are going to come here 10 years from now and buy houses and so forth. So I don't know what the vision is. I have looked at the vision that we have, and it's kind of a hodgepodge. You talk to 10 people, they have different visions. And to me, the architectural planning and zoning is the word art has to go in it. We are too prescriptive on a lot of the language that we have to allow the art and flexibility to match the community and the future of the community. So although maybe 90% of the code and the standard that's presented is appropriate, but there's 10% that is not there, or it doesn't have the vision of what the people want. Because if you look at the email written comments and survey, most of the positive ones are 30%. Most of the negative is 40, 30%. And in the middle, there is a zone that they don't know what they want. So we are putting a lot of emphasis on that 30% that are want to see things be restrictive and so forth. And I think we should allow the professional, the architects, the engineers, the developers, the staff to make some of this decision rather than prescribe everything. So at that point, why do we have commissions and architects and engineers? Everything can be designed. We can give them a blueprint and say, build this. So that's my opinion.
Thank you. Robin, you're up next.
I appreciate all the hard work in here. I appreciate the amendments that the commission has made, but I cannot support it at this point. I cannot support the 5-story allowance, and so I will be voting no.
Okay. I've been clamoring for a new zoning code for 15 or 20 years, replace what I always call the buggy whip document. Good God, it was Most of it was created and worked on when Carter was president. I am disappointed about the 5-foot, 65-foot height in the mixed-use area. I'm tempted to vote against this, but I'm not going to. I'm going to rely on the next stage here of City Council looking at this and weighing into the height issue. So that's the reason why I brought it up in the first place. We're advisory only. Council will make the final decision. This is the first time our city is moving away from the non-creative, dry, maximum height, setbacks, lot coverage code to a character-based code, which will allow for creative design and force our architects and developers to be more creative. I disagree with a bit with Behzad in that there's still plenty of room for architects to use their creativity to create interesting buildings. Yes, there are more regulations than the good old days, but the good old days of our old zoning and code is really the major reason why we're looking at all these bad buildings in our downtown area. It's still, our code, even with these amendments, will still allow, a modest increase in the height, although, again, I'm against the 65-foot height limit. It does improve, I think will improve the vitality of our downtown. And then the downtown will not be frozen in time, but allow the downtown to grow and prosper. So this is, as Churchill said, this is not the end. This is not the beginning of the end, but it's a end of the beginning. We have 3 more block areas to work with, including our arterials, our neighborhoods, etc. This is just our first tippy-toe step. This I call this stage the tiptoe through the tulips. Really is going to be more heavy work for the Planning Commission in the next year when they look at the rest of the city. It's a little bit awkward right now because we're splicing in ULAC code into our old antique code. So there's going to be some confusion, and that needs to be, it's still going to be confusing just because we're putting a Band-Aid on a broken arm here, broken arm being our old code. So with my problem with the height limit, I'm still going to vote in favor of this. Any other comment? Seeing none, we'll vote on the main motion. Thumbs up or thumbs down?
The main motion as amended. We did have.
Thank you.
We did have 4 amendments that passed. Do we need to recap those?
Why don't you go ahead quickly and state them?
I'm going to give a brief summary.
Yes.
The 4 that passed, Chair Rudnicki's motion for parking credits passed 4-3. Commissioner Coronado's motion to amend paragraph 6 regarding shared parking space from 300 feet to the 1,320 feet passed. And Chair Rudnicki's motion regarding the 2.5 stories and maximum height of 30 feet passed. And the last one had to do with the rooftop garden credits. So the main motion.
I'm sorry. You done, Colleen?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Sorry about that. So with that said, up or down?
The vote is 6 in favor. The motion carries.
Good. Okay. We'll move on. I mentioned that we're going to allow the speakers that were cut off when we were under general comments to have the chance to get their 3 minutes in again. Colleen, do we have any of those 2 callers wanting to call back in?
Chair, we do still have one of the callers on the line. I'm just going to give a real quick reminder that if you had planned on speaking during public comment earlier and were not able to because of the technical difficulties that we were having, please do call in if you aren't already in the queue. Again, this is an opportunity to speak to the commission about anything that was not on the agenda this evening. Chair, right now we have one caller in the queue who has been patiently waiting. Caller with the last 3 phone number digits of 819. If you care to speak, please press *6 to unmute yourself and begin speaking now.
Hi, Planning Commission. This is Pam Chapman, and I live in downtown, as I did before. Tough to not comment on the vote, but let me go back to the whole envision process. We have no integrated idea of what the future Littleton would look like. I think what you're considering is the city of the past 50 years, and the city of the next 50 years is going to be really different, and that is not what Envision or the comp plan specifies. We have a regressive document which does not put in the essential protections that the city needs to grow into the future healthily. But we have a lot of permissions and entitlements for development for the current market, which isn't going to last. You never open up a city, especially one that's been protected for 40 years, to development in the current market. It astounds me that there's this blue sky, everything will be great, will be economically viable if we just let current development do whatever it wants. That's never been true, or almost never in history, very rarely. Cities have to protect themselves and assure that the big stones are in the jar first. In other words, the protections for historic districts, the requirements for attainable housing, the requirements for sustainable building, and whether it's in the building code or not, it should be here now. It should be in the comp plan. You shouldn't be making changes to code without those protections in place first. We have no understanding of what the future city of Littleton looks like in the future. The growth, where it's going to be, how we're going to get attainable housing, how we're going to have transportation work or function in the city. Planning Commission, that's your job. I'd like you to do better in the future. Thanks.
Thank you. Colleen, anyone else?
Chair, I do still have one other caller in the queue. I do not have any hands raised at this time. Caller with the last 3 phone number digits of 693. If you wish to address the commission, please press *9 to raise your hand. Chair, there's no action in the queue.
Okay. Give them another second or two. We'll move on. Comments and reports. Community Development Director, Kathleen. Or Jennifer, what am I saying? Sorry, getting dark, getting late.
No, that's fine. It's confusing. So I just want to let you guys know right now, we do not have anything on the agenda for the 14th of September. So you can enjoy an evening off. We do on the 28th of September have a potential item on the calendar, so keep that one open. And we'll have a better idea on that here in the next, by the end of this week.
Is that it?
Those are the big ones. Kathleen, do you have anything else to add?
I do not. We are making some adjustments to the Envision Littleton calendar for the ULUC, so I'll look forward to sharing that as soon as we have it finalized with the consultant team at KKC.
Commissioner members, any comments, general comments? Seeing no rush to raise their hands. Just a comment for me, and having lunch with Jennifer and Robin, and I.
And Mike.
Oh, that's right. Well, who can forget Mike? There was talk about, the next phase, how do we handle the remaining 3 blocks of the ULAC? And rather than wait for 6 months to start thinking about it, perhaps start to have study sessions on the topic just to get geared up for what's going to be a hard slog. So I just bring that up to notify planning commissioners that hopefully we can take up some of our time with study sessions to indeed wade into the changing the entire code to the Unified Land Use Code. So I have nothing else to say. Any other comments from commissioners? Well done. I expected 20 amendments and we'd be done like at midnight. So Reed, I lose the bet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nothing else. We are adjourned. Thank you, commissioners. All of you showed up tonight. Thank you for the public that listened in, and thank you for staff, all the hard work, and thank you for our consultants for all their hard work. We are adjourned.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Have a good evening.